Hey guys, Ben here and welcome back to another video on The Flash. Today we're going to be talking about Grant Gustin and did he actually record a cameo for the Flash film, because Kevin Smith has said otherwise. So if you do go on to enjoy the video, please be sure to leave a like and a comment and subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any future DCTV videos later this year. So hopefully all of you guys watching this video have seen The Flash by now. It's been out for about like a week or so, or just under a week. But the article we're going to be breaking down is from Bleeding Cool. So they actually watched the whole of Kevin Smith's Fat Man Beyond podcast that he does live, and they pulled out an interesting segment, and I've watched a bunch of this Fat Man Beyond episode. It's actually a really interesting episode, so I go recommend you actually check out, because Kevin Smith is awesome and I love what they do with Fat Man Beyond. It's a great podcast where they talk for nearly 3 hours about a whole bunch of geeky topics. And one of their main topics in the most recent one they've done is to do with the Flash film. They give their thoughts on the film and everything like that, and they discuss the fact that Reverse Flash doesn't show up, and there is lots of interesting topics that they break down. But one interesting topic that Bleeding Cool points out is, did Grant Gustin film a cameo? They talk about the cameos in the Flash film in the podcast, and Kevin Smith, as the title suggests, has us confused. The article basically starts by saying, over the last couple of months there was reports that Grant Gustin wasn't going to be in the Flash film, and this was confirmed by both Grant Gustin and Andy Muschietti, and this resulted in a ton of unhappy Arrowverse fans who want a little more clarity about the decision making process behind choosing all of these cameos and leaving the guy who played the Flash for 9 years plus out of the film. And then the article goes on to say, well, leave it to none other than Kevin Smith on Fat Man Beyond to dump even more gasoline on our already raging dumpster fire of random speculation. While discussing the cameos, Smith wondered, as we all did, why they would have chosen to not include Grant Gustin, referencing how Miller had appeared during one of the Arrowverse crossovers. So if you go to about 34 minutes into the podcast, you can actually see what we're talking about. You can listen to Kevin Smith talk, and basically he starts it off talking about Grant Gustin, just saying it's really weird that the guy who played the Flash for 9+ years didn't show up, especially when Ezra actually showed up on the Flash. Obviously that was in the Arrowverse crossover, Crisis on Infinite Earths, and that was a huge moment because it was confirmed by everyone at DC that it was canon, and Grant Gustin is the reason that Ezra decides to call himself the Flash, which obviously gets called in this film, and so they totally ignore it in the film. I think it could be down to Andy Muschietti not really getting into it and not being so involved, that maybe he was like, oh yeah, that happened, but you know, I'm going to do my own thing. That's just me talking here. But it's interesting it's coming from Kevin Smith, because I think we all agree with Kevin Smith, and I think he's like the one true comic book nerdy director that we all know. He literally knows more stuff than most of us out there about these characters, and obviously he directed episodes of The Flash, he directed Supergirl, he directed loads of stuff that is just some of the best content out there to do with comic books and everything like that. And he goes on to say that he actually heard, and this was why he was confused after coming out of the film, because he heard that Grant Gustin had shot a cameo scene for the film. Now, to be clear, he does actually say he doesn't have any sort of confirmation because he hasn't talked to Grant Gustin about it, but he did hear that he shot something for the film, so potentially that could be a deleted scene that could come when they release the film on video. But again, we have to emphasize that although this is an interesting development coming from Kevin Smith, who is obviously very reputable when it comes to stuff like this, he does say he hasn't been able to confirm it since he heard that original thing from a specific person, I guess. He doesn't really go into exactly where he got given that information. And in the podcast, he actually speculates that maybe they didn't use it for time, and so maybe that was part of the cameos that were cut, but they just haven't publicly advertised it maybe. Like, we've heard that they actually did some stuff with Linda Carter. They had some other cameos that they were preparing to do, like Cesar Romero, but they cut those for time. And so if they actually shot something for Grant or just used some footage, that might be in the deleted scenes. But again, nothing is confirmed, but this is a super interesting development because this comes from Kevin Smith, and unless he was fed false information, I'm pretty sure that the Flash director would have thought about including the guy that played the Flash for 9 years. So personally, I would really like Andy Muschietti to come out and say what exactly went on with that. I feel like it has to be eventually addressed because it's just such a big thing. Kevin Smith actually went on to talk about the Jay Garrick version of the Flash that we saw in the film, and the fact that he thought it was John Wesley Shipp. Obviously John Wesley Shipp looks very different, and if you guys remember that cameo, it very much so looks like Teddy Sears, and Teddy Sears played Zoom in the Flash. He played a fake version of Jay Garrick back in season 2, but obviously that was debunked pretty quickly after Zoom was revealed. And so unless Andy Muschietti somehow got confused and was like, this is the real Jay Garrick, let's introduce Jay Garrick to this, obviously having that one Flash cameo in the midst of all those Superman and Batman cameos, it was definitely much needed. But still, I think we're all confused about what version of the Flash was that, especially because there's been reports as Teddy Sears has come online and saying bits and pieces about that certain character, which we'll get into in a minute because we do have an article to break down. But it's just an odd choice to go with Jay Garrick over a different version of Barry Allen that has been so prominent in the last 9 years. And I really don't feel like there was any issues. Like, it's Warner Brothers, I'm pretty sure they have the rights to use Grant Gustin's likeness, so just like you saw in Titans recently, where they used some old footage and Grant Gustin wasn't even made aware of it, yeah, he's probably going to get a mini check somewhere down the line because of them using his likeness in the show. But they probably have the rights, and they can just ask Grant Gustin themselves if they want to CGI him and make a false version of himself just running there on the treadmill, or using footage that has already been shot in the past and basically incorporating it into the film. Or, as we've been talking about, if Grant Gustin actually did shoot a scene for the Flash film, and you guys have to remember, he could have just totally gone on the green screen in Vancouver. Warner Brothers was like, yeah, go ahead, do some running on this green screen and we'll use this footage. And if that actually did happen, why aren't they using it? That is the real question. So we just have to wait and see. But yeah, I totally agree with Kevin Smith that it's a weird choice that they've gone for this version of the Flash. It's not Grant Gustin's Flash. It is in fact a version of Jay Garrick, and we really don't know right now, is that John Wesley Shipp's Flash? There's been rumors that maybe it's a DH version of John Wesley Shipp, paying homage to the 90s show, but again, he looks very different in that show to what we saw in the Flash film. So I'm still of the opinion that that's actually Teddy Sears. They've just used his likeness, and Teddy Sears isn't aware of it, but he's gonna get a check at some point because literally it looks like him. Or they tried to create some sort of ambiguous Flash where it doesn't really look like anyone specific. But that's kind of weird in the midst of all these cameos with all these recognizable faces from the past. Why wouldn't you go with someone, a version of the Flash that is recognizable? Why not John Wesley Shipp, or why not Grant Gustin's Flash? I understand if they wanted Teddy Sears' Flash because maybe they liked him on the Flash, but it's still a weird choice. So let's go ahead and move over to this TV Line article, which is titled "The Flash Movie, Teddy Sears Weighs In on the Doppelganger Cameo Confusion." So Teddy Sears would be first to admit that the Golden Age speedster glimpse in the Flash movie favors his character from the CW's Arrowverse series. He has gone online and he's made it public that he was never consulted about any of this, and he's not entirely sure. He says, I mean, that looks like my likeness when presented with a screenshot of the cameo from the film shared by someone on Twitter, but it is not him. In the wake of advanced screenings of The Flash, there were reports that Sears' Jay Garrick puts in a fleeting appearance, winged helmet and all. But well-placed sources on both the TV and theatrical side told TV Line on Thursday night that the alleged Sears sighting is a case of mistaken identity. That said, Cameo was absolutely not archival footage of the Flash TV series Alan, but a generic Golden Age Flash representation played by no actor of note, and Sears absolutely did not film anything for the new flick. He says, people kept telling me that I was in the new Flash movie. He says, I mean, I'm sleep deprived with a newborn at home, so my memory is a little foggy, but I'm pretty sure I would have remembered shooting a major DC Studios film. He says, sadly, I'm not in this, appearing alongside the likes of Christopher Reeve and George Reeves Superman, as well as Adam West Batman. Sears added, Then with a veritable wink, he says thanks for confirming. So there you have it. That is apparently official confirmation that the Golden Age Flash you see in the Flash film is in fact no one. It's literally no one. It's just a CGI generic representation of the character. Now this is extremely weird. In my opinion, it just looks way too much like Teddy Sears' Flash. Like, they've looked at Teddy Sears, they definitely did that when they were doing the CGI, and they were like, okay, he's like a good representation of Jay Garrick, the Golden Age Flash, so let's go ahead and make it like similar, but not similar enough that we don't have to pay anyone for it. It's going to be, you know, just a random Golden Age Flash. But as I said earlier, I really don't understand why they would do just a non-actual person in the midst of all those cameos of actual recognizable faces. So why wouldn't you use John Wesley Shipp, or why wouldn't you use Teddy Sears if this report is actually true that this is not Teddy Sears and he just looks somewhat similar? It just makes no sense in the case of the context here. I'm sure some of you guys agree with me. Let me know down in the comments below. Am I going crazy? But this just literally is super confusing to me, because you have a version of Jay Garrick with a winged helmet. He's running on a sort of treadmill or just running on the spot during all of these cameos on another Earth that is colliding. So this is apparent confirmation that Teddy Sears is not in this film, despite the fact that everyone is convinced that it's him. And also, like I said earlier, there are some people that are convinced that it's a de-aged John Wesley Shipp, but as it turns out, it's supposed to be just a generic CGI interpretation of the Golden Age Flash from the comics. And this is why I think it's totally weird as well, because why would you waste precious time? And Andy Muschietti has been evidently clear all the other cameos were cut for time, and then to go ahead and use a generic CGI version of a character, it just really doesn't make any logical sense. So yeah, that pretty much does it. Sorry for getting a little bit ranty here and there throughout this video, but hopefully it was interesting. Obviously, the Kevin Smith report about Grant Gustin supposedly filming a scene is of great interest, and I would really like to know in the future if that actually happened or not. And also, the whole Jay Garrick saga is definitely a big conundrum for us DC fans as we think about what happened in the Flash film. But yeah, so that pretty much does it for this video. Please be sure to leave a like and a comment and subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any future videos. We're uploading daily right now, so don't miss any videos as we upload them. But for now, you can click on the top right corner of the screen to watch my latest video, and I'll catch you guys later. Goodbye.
I see red.